This is Listen Lakeland, the show that keeps you up to date on all things happening in and around the Lakeland area. Here's your chance to plan your family activities and learn more about what your city government and your neighbors are doing to make Lakeland a great place to live, work, and play.
Welcome to this edition of Listen Lakeland. My name is Dr. Sallie Stone, and I am your host for today's show. Joining me today is Mr. Alis Drumgo. He is the CRA Manager here at the City of Lakeland. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Drumgo.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Stone. It's a pleasure to be on, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, I'm excited as well. So I want to jump right into information about the CRA that maybe many people don't know. I have personal experience, and I am so thrilled to have you come on and talk a little bit about the CRA. I call this show Community Connections because I think that's a really big part of what the CRA is able to do here in Lakeland. So to get started, how does the CRA work?
Wow. The CRA really is about connecting with the community. We are community driven. CRA stands for Community Redevelopment Agency. And the CRA works, it's established by statute. And so what we're allowed to do within the city of Lakeland is, so what we do is we take the tax dollars that get collected at the county level, and we have contributors here for Lakeland CRAs are the city, the county, and Lakeland Area Mass Transit. We take those dollars and we specifically funnel them into projects into pre-designated areas. And so with that, the CRA is able to go out and tackle challenges that are defined in a previously established redevelopment plan. And here in Lakeland, we have 3 redevelopment areas. Each of those redevelopment areas has its own trust fund. So they have separate pots of money. They can't be commingled. And each of them has specific target objectives that need to be accomplished within each of those redevelopment areas.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's pretty awesome. But you said a couple of things that really just kind of, piqued my interest. So
Sure.
Tax dollars that are collected
Yes.
from the city, the county, and mass transit.
Yes.
And used primarily to tackle challenges. What do challenges look like in this particular area?
Well, it depends on the redevelopment area. So we in Lakeland, we have downtown, we have a Dixieland CRA, and we have midtown CRA. And those 3 districts are very different. The Dixieland corridor is primarily focused on the historic South Florida Avenue corridor, and it spans from close to downtown around Lime Street to Ariana. And we solely focus on the majority of the properties that are front in Florida Avenue. But the objectives there are pretty straightforward in that there are issues with land uses, there are small lots, there are parking challenges for Dixieland. There are also some older dilapidated buildings that are in pretty bad shape that need renovation. And so our goal is to focus on renovating those structures, reestablishing economic viability in that area, and then also to attract the land uses that will help Dixieland be successful long term. Now, when you look at an area like Midtown, which is it's pretty much most of the area north of the in-town bypass, and it spans up to I-4, and then it goes as far to the west as Wabash Avenue, and to the east just over near Gary Road. So it's a pretty large area, and there are predominantly neighborhoods within that area. So some different objectives, a lot of them neighborhood centered, affordable housing, business driven as well to attract businesses into some of those vacant corridors where businesses have typically, kind of vacated over the years. And, not to get too deep into urban planning and urban renewal from the 60s and 70s where, you had a lot of roadways chopping through neighborhoods, cutting them up and kind of preventing development, and then a lot of out migration from urban neighborhoods. And so with that, you end up with a lot of times just empty communities. And so those are things that we combat against. We like to call it blight. It's a general term, but it really is, old structures, vacant lots. We have a lot of issues here in Lakeland with folks who may pass on and don't leave anyone property, that they don't deed their property over to to one family member, and so fall into disrepair. And there may be family members who own property and don't know it. So just little things like that that make it difficult to then redevelop or renovate structures, or to see those properties get into the hands of folks who would otherwise be able to do something positive with them.
Wow. And so, redevelopment is a big deal. I mean, there are so many different facets, just the things that you are speaking about in terms of affordable housing and
Yes.
neighborhoods and, blight. You walk downtown or you walk around in some areas and you wonder, why are these buildings, empty, or, who do they belong to, or, what could be done with those? Or those are some of the things that you all have to take into consideration as you look at development for Midtown and for Dixieland and for downtown. I mean, downtown is amazing. It has just sprung up into almost like a revitalized area. I mean, is that what you are thinking to want to do with the other areas, or what are the goals specifically for how you decide what goes and what does?
Yeah, so the redevelopment plan is a real key for us. We look at our redevelopment plan for each district, and then we also look at the city's comprehensive plan to look at what policies are important for us to kind of plan projects around. And so you'll start to see, as of late, our city commissioners have really talked a lot about affordable housing, and it's becoming more dire because, like, land is a very finite resource. You can't generate more of it. You either go up, or you go nowhere. And so what we've done as a city over the last couple of years, in alignment with our redevelopment plan, we've created a land bank of properties that we want to see developed into affordable housing. We've also allocated money specific to the recruitment for affordable housing. And so when we look at these strategic initiatives that are challenges within the redevelopment plan, or policies within our comprehensive plan, and we say, okay, now let's back into projects and initiatives that can meet those needs of our community. So for us to be long-term a successful community, we realize that we need to figure out how to integrate affordable housing. And you can't just have it on the fringes. It can't just be in neighborhoods with low census, with low income census tracts. You need affordable housing everywhere. So
yeah, indeed. Yeah. As I sit and listen to you, you have such a strong knowledge in this whole area of redevelopment. How did you come into this particular area? Is it urban planning, redevelopment? How did you land into this spot? Because it's certainly one that requires to have a lot of knowledge and information.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those people who sees himself as a public servant. And, personally, I served in the military and, done tours overseas, and you see communities that suffer. You see where people don't get the help that they need. And all it really takes is for someone to kind of grab the reins a little bit and try to make something happen. And so, having been exposed to that, having grown up in a not so great neighborhood environment as well, and wanting to transcend all that, I think that it made me focus on how to improve communities and what I could do to lend a hand to do that. So even I like to tell people that come through the door, even if the CRA can't help you, I want to help you, and so I try to send folks to resources, even if it's not something that is available within the confines or the scope of work that I do personally. And that also lends itself to volunteering after hours to do stuff because, you can't do it all at work, right? If it's not something that you do in office. But yes, so just having a passion for community, wanting to help people, going off to college and getting into planning and studying urban planning and regional planning. And ultimately, I did work in Newark. And Newark is a very, very strong history of folks with who pride themselves on community organization and engagement. And so I learned a lot there, and wanting to just take that with me, and ended up here in Lakeland and able to do similar work and to be able to empower people. And so that's what I want to keep doing.
That is so awesome. And, certainly I want to thank you for your service and, all that you did to support, the ability to create better neighborhoods. And so when I think about it, one of the things that came to my mind, because, we've interacted in many different ways. And when I see you, just getting down into the, for lack of a better word, the weeds, and just doing that hands-on grassroots type of development, it is really, not just impressive, but it's so needful. What would you say would be one of the projects that, you are most proud of? One that kind of just gripped your heart. I know that you are, you love neighborhoods, and you go in and you sit on the porch and you talk to the neighborhood leaders, and I know you take your daughters into the neighborhoods and make sure that they are around a good support system. What would you say about your job, your role in the CRA, or a project that kind of grips your heart and was one of those heart pulls?
Yeah, well, you and I share that we were both educators at some point, and so, like, for me, I think educators like to learn. And one of the things that I learned coming into Lakeland is that people don't go far. And when we did Lincoln Square, the residential project that sits right around Pauly Diggs neighborhood and Webster Park, right in that area. It's right on the border by Lincoln Academy.
It's beautiful.
21 single-family homes in a neighborhood where we tried to get private developers to come in and build those houses, and people told us no one would ever want to live there. We took over some apartments that were in pretty bad shape, and we ended up demoing them because they were full of asbestos, and it was crime-ridden in the area. And there was already a perception that we were preparing to push people out of the neighborhood. And when we marketed those houses, we went to churches and we did the legwork to let people know that we were building those houses to provide space for people who lived in the community before, who left and wanted to come back, or who wanted to get closer to family members. And so, with that, being able to build a new product on that scale in an area where it hadn't happened before, that was pretty big for us. And it was important for me to see the type of homeowners that came back into the neighborhood as well, because they were people who they were right there on the pews when we were pitching the programs. And there were folks who they lived in the apartments before.
Wow.
And there's one gentleman in particular who said to me, I had the same view out of my window.
Oh my goodness,
when I was in the apartments. And so, to know that he lived there 20 some odd 30 years ago, and he's going to retire in this house, and he can afford it, and he will forever be able to afford it, because unlike the private market, we had no real need to maximize our profits on selling him that home. And ideally, he'll retire there, and at some point he'll have a family member that will inherit that asset, which to date has accrued some $90,000 in equity over the last 2 years. So, we think that with that in particular with Lincoln Square, that's game changer, generational, wealth potentially that gets sent over to some of the younger generations, and the impact that it's had on the architecture in the community, other people trying to mimic the style, other new starts, new builds in the area. It just shows me that was worthwhile.
That was absolutely a phenomenal project, and every time it changed the atmosphere of the entire neighborhood.
It has.
It just brought a sense of not just neighborhood pride, but it also impacted on so many different levels. Now, when you said he had the same view, that actually gave me chills. I mean, because that is pretty awesome to go from a blighted community to home ownership and looking and knowing you can retire and have an asset that has 90, some $1,000s of equity in it. That's unheard of. I mean, the housing market right now is telling us that, to have an opportunity like that is probably a once in a lifetime, because that's pretty awesome. You said something when you were talking about the development of the project and people thinking that they were going to get pushed out. There's a word that's been trending locally. I think when you hear about redevelopment and revitalization and community sustainable communities, and I may not get this word right, but I think it's gentrification. Is that correct?
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that and how you all have been able to not allow that to come and overwhelm the good that you have been trying to do. It's just so many facets of it. I'm intrigued by that whole concept.
Yeah, well, I think it's a layered effect. When people gravitate to new things, and then they in turn want to build or buy new things, and then it drives prices on the old things, and that's ultimately how you end up with gentrification, where folks just start to slowly, the neighborhood doesn't look the way it used to, and and it drives prices, and then the people who live there can't afford to live there anymore, and you get investors in a community. And so the trick, I think, is to balance the investors and the homesteaders, to balance the new faces with the old faces. And what our planning and our housing team collectively have done along with us is the plan for affordable housing. It really is being proactive to make sure that we generate enough new units at an affordable rate to offset what we know to be a booming market rate environment. So with the commitments that we get from our city leaders, it helps us because they're being forward thinking, and they know that now, the Winter Haven, Lakeland, this MSA, the area is one of the second fastest growing in the country, right? So to know that we are going to continue to get people to migrate into Lakeland and into this area, and then for us to need to offset that with affordable housing, and doing that by setting aside the funding, recruiting affordable housing partners, but also acquiring land and holding it for the purpose of then building more affordable units is something that we've been able to do. And so we throw ourselves in that competitive market to make sure that we can build relationships with affordable builders, and it helps us to ideally kind of offset the impact of what could be gentrification.
I think you said balance being the key.
It is.
Being able to balance those while you're developing those, because not too long ago, I would say maybe before COVID-19, threw a curve into a lot of things, and I want you to talk about that and how it's impacted the CRA. But prior to that, really, shooting up the pole to the height that it has reached, there were conversations around there being many areas of opportunity zone. So is that connected to being able to manage the balance, or is that something altogether different?
Well, I think, and let me try to tackle that question. So the opportunity zones with that program at the federal level was really to attract investors into low-income census tracts. And so it does create this, I would say, ability to, the desire to want to park money into low-income neighborhoods. It doesn't necessarily mean that those investors have the intent of gentrifying the neighborhood either.
Right.
But the other part of that is making sure, if you look at it locally, we are unveiling apartments at Meriton. They're slowly starting to come online.
Yeah, they look great.
But at the same time, we have a groundbreaking for a Midtown Lofts, which is wholly affordable, right? Like almost 100% workforce or and below. So when you think about that, I don't know that there are many communities where you get a market rate unit and an affordable apartment community within less than a quarter mile of one another, and and it's intentional that the government, the local government, played a hand in both of those to make sure that we have both products coming online.
Wow.
You know,
And so our local government you're referencing when you say that played a role in that. Is that a part of the whole concept that we are hearing and that I'm a part of and certainly have embraced it fully is the concept of lift Lakeland. You know, let's lift Lakeland up so that it's a great place to live and work and play for everybody. So do you think that those two affordable housing or those two projects in general tie into that concept of lifting Lakeland?
Well, it ties into the concept of, you know, lifting Lakeland, the quality of life, right? Having a diverse product, because with the market rate, you get the affordable as well. And I think it also ties into, again, a clear understanding, because you know, with the CRA, we're able to deliver a Meriton product and have a private-public partnership with those developers who want to develop market rate and take a chance here in Lakeland. You know, it costs the same amount of money to build that unit here as it would elsewhere, and so we're aware of that the rents may not even out here in Lakeland as they would in Tampa, where the developer has other developments. You know, so.
You say so much stuff that's so intriguing. Every time you say something, I want to hop on that. So let me hop on. You mentioned public-private partnerships. What exactly is that?
Yeah, and it is. It's a relationship between your public government or public entity and a private entity that wants to see a project go forward, and you make a deal that is a win-win for your community. And so we try to harp on that because we don't have to do it all. You know, the government, we can't do it all. It would cost us a ton of money to build out a project like Meriton. You know, our partners at Yard on Mass for the food truck park, Polk County's first food truck park. I believe we might still be the only food truck park, but you know, partnering with a private entity to deliver that product, and we don't have to expend all of our dollars to be able to do that. It helps because it costs government, you know, a lot more money to do things than it does
for sure
a private entity who does it all the time more efficiently. And so we realize that there are times when we want to go at it alone or when we have to go at it alone, but ideally it's good to have.
It makes sense.
To have partners at the table, and you get a better return on your dollar, your investment.
Well, and speaking of dollar and investment, you know, you talked a little bit about how the CRA is funded.
Yes.
You know, what happens, you know, does the money run out, and what happens when the money does run out?
It does run out, and every year we put together a capital improvement plan. So we do what we call a CIP. We do a budget, and we plan projects for a specific purpose in each district. So budget season is a real party for me. I get to because I get to sit down and look at these three different districts and to see if we're programming dollars in the right spaces to meet the needs based on what our city commissioners are looking for. And so we have budget workshops, we have internal meetings to talk these things through to make sure we're allocating money to meet the needs of the redevelopment plan and to meet the strategic objectives of our leadership and where the city is headed. So it is, you know, it's the CRA does not have the same buying power as the city overall. And I'll just drop it out there and say that, you know, our Dixieland CRA, we only have a $300,000 budget. For our downtown CRA, it's only about $1.7 million. And then in Midtown, it's about $4 million. So in total, you know, we operate with anywhere from $6 to $7 million, but we produce $60 million projects like a Meriton. You know, we produce a $16 million project like a Midtown Lofts. So we're lucky enough to leverage those dollars to build the right relationships to get a bigger product.
Absolutely. And so then with you know, there is a point in time when the money may run out, and if so,
I hear she says, "Where is the money?
Where's the money?
Where is the money?" So every year when we plan projects, you know, we we allocate most dollars. We allocate most dollars, and so there are times when we may have a project that doesn't get executed in one fiscal year. It'll go into the next fiscal year, and so we plan them long term. So we may use dollars from one year to kind of half plan a project or to do a preliminary phase before we get in depth and get deep into the execution of a project. So when we look at our budget cycle in that way, we have to really be mindful of what's coming down the line. So CRAs do not last forever. They have limitations on them. So every time a CRA is established, it has a sunset date, and my job is to work myself out of a job by being.
That doesn't sound all that.
No, by being effective. Right, you be effective, and of course, there's always redevelopment. There's always something to do, something to improve upon, because we do so much. But really, the money does run out, and so I'll give you an example. Our midtown CRA, our Dixieland CRA, they've only got a decade left. We got 10 years. We can renew the CRAs, but it's not solely up to us to do it. We have to petition to renew or extend the life of a CRA. We can modify the boundaries of the CRA, but ultimately we want to be able to keep serving the community and to keep meeting those needs. So we try to check all the boxes to make sure we're delivering on the goods. So, but the money, it does run out. It does run out, and there are times where we have run out of money. We've told folks who come through the door. We were one year we were giving away so many down payment assistance grants because the housing market was pumped. Like it was humming 2 years ago, and I want to say we burned through like $600,000 in maybe 3 months. Yeah, maybe three to 4 months, and we had to tell people, hey, we're out of funding for that program, and it happens. So, but we just kind of shift to other line items in our budget that we have funding set aside for, and we tackle those even harder, so there's always something to do.
Well, I, for one, am not a proponent of you working yourself out of a job, because you do an amazing job with leading the CRA, along with all of our city officials and, our mayor, and our city commissioners. It's an amazing opportunity to make Lakeland one of the best places to live. And as we draw to a close, how do people get in touch with you if they want more information or they have any other questions? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, well, I am not the CRA alone. My team is very diligent and hardworking, and you can call our office where our direct line is 863-834-5200. You can ask to talk to a CRA team member. And you can also go to our website. We have our own website. It's standalone, www.lakelandcra.net. And you can look at all the programs that we have available. And if there's something that you're just not sure about, we're always willing to answer questions. If you just want to tell me about your experiences or things your experiences or things that you'd like to, talk about or see within your community, I'm all ears too. And if it's something that I can, redirect to one of my colleagues outside of my office, I'm always willing to do that as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again. Sure. I could not have asked for a better guest, and I can truly speak from personal experience. The CRA as a whole, yourself, and all the other team members that work alongside of you do a phenomenal job. And I encourage everyone to, reach out and find out what's going on. You'd be surprised how much is going on in Lakeland. It's going to be amazing. And, we get to see it unfold. So thank you again. Maybe we'll come back and do a part 2. Yeah. And keep it moving. You have been listening to Dr. Sallie Stone and my special guest, Mr. Alis Drumgo with the CRA. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Listen Lakeland is brought to you as a collaborative project between Lakeland Vision, the City of Lakeland, and Hall Communications. It's truly a community working together to provide an exceptional quality of life.